So we recently seen Tesla stock experience this breakout moment, and it appears that this breakout is still sustaining itself and holding its momentum, while simultaneously the S&P 500 is hitting new all-time highs, which is in sync with what I shared was likely to happen for those that are insiders at Push and Profit Research. Now, when we take a look at the heat map for today's trading session, we see a lot of green, which is pretty bullish. Now, this makes sense considering that we recently got a report from Bank of America suggesting that its institutional clients are buying at record levels for stocks that we haven't seen in a while. And so essentially, big money is buying into stocks. Now, this makes sense when we take a look at what has recently taken place for a lot of the macroeconomic data. And today we also got some updates from a macro perspective. For example, we had an inflationary report with headline inflation coming in as expected. Now, we did have core inflation, which excludes the volatility from food and energy, and that did tick up a bit, so that's kind of a bit of a concern. But regardless, even after this report, we ended up seeing that the future markets are pricing in now a 94.4% chance that the Federal Reserve is going to be cutting rates by 25 basis points for its upcoming decision in September. So that's pretty bullish because we want the Fed to cut rates. Now, we don't want them to cut rates because everything's deteriorating and it's too late, but we want them to do it sooner before it's too late because, of course, once the federal funds rate is cut, that means that companies now have to pay less to borrow money and it's cheaper to expand and grow. And so that's definitely very bullish. That kind of contributes to this bullish story that we're seeing with Tesla. And I want to go ahead and talk about a few other details in regards to Tesla. But before we do so, I always forget to mention, if you're new to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any future uploads. But with that said, let's talk about what other economic reports we got today, because we also got the National Federation of Independent Business reporting small business optimism. And we see that small business optimism actually increased for the last month, which is good. So this is kind of showing us that small businesses are now expecting that the next 6 months aren't going to be as bad as they initially expected. Now, we did have that huge scare with tariffs, but currently it looks like businesses are or small businesses are redirecting how they feel. And we want to kind of, tap into how they feel, because oftentimes it's an indicator of what we're going to be expecting, right? If small businesses are kind of concerned, well, then we could enter into a bad economic environment. But we're starting to see that concern kind of waver off a bit, which is pretty bullish. Again, all contributing to this bullish story. Now, I did do an independent poll for those of you guys that are part of the channel, asking really, how do you think Tesla stock is going to close for this week? And it looks like a great majority of you guys said that it's going to be closing upwards. So I just kind of like to tap in and ask you guys how you guys believe Tesla stock is going to close for the week. But in terms of news, right, we had the actual Tesla page on X post this video of FSD driving 362 miles from San Francisco to LA without any intervention from the person in the driver's seat. And so we're seeing that FSD is having these improvements, which we'll go ahead and talk about in a bit. I kind of want to highlight that because that's a big story, or a big part of the Tesla story. Now, we also are still having Elon Musk kind of tease us with this FSD release that's going to be coming out. For example, just on August 10th, he mentioned the FSD release in about 6 weeks will be a dramatic gain with a 10x higher parameter count and many other improvements. It's going through training and testing now. Once we confirm real-world safety of FSD 14, which we think will be amazing, the car will nag much less. And so this is kind of where there's this huge dichotomy for the story for Tesla, because on one end of the spectrum, people are saying, well, look, FSD is still improving. It's having these massive improvements. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have people saying, well, that is good, but we're still not at level 5 autonomy, which is what we need for robo-taxis to really sustain or really contribute to the growth or justify the price of Tesla stock going up, right? And that's kind of more in the camp that I'm in. And I know sometimes I get people commenting like, Justin, you're not bullish enough on Tesla, right? And I try to, have this kind of nuanced approach where I'm like, okay, look, I am bullish, but there's some certain things that I'm also kind of a bit neutral on, right? Now, from a technical perspective, right? Let's go ahead and zoom in on the chart. Yes, we did have a red candle for Tesla, or in this case, it's a black candle. I have my candles just black and white. Makes it much easier to identify price action. And so we had this black candle. Now, just because we had this black candle, it doesn't mean anything is bad, right? Because essentially what this means is that we opened up higher, but the close was lower than the open, but we're still higher than the previous close. And that is what actually matters. In fact, for those of you guys that are insiders within Push and Profit Research, I was saying this exact concept for the overall S&P 500. I was saying, look, yeah, we had some days where the market was down, but structurally we're still going up because we're having higher lows, right? So when you look at it, okay, we opened here, we closed here, then the next trading session we opened up higher, then we opened up higher but closed lower, but this close is higher than the previous low, right? And so structurally, I've been sharing that the market is still intact to continue hitting new all-time highs. And guess what? That is exactly what we got today. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, right? I don't have a crystal ball. But what I'm saying is that structurally, the market was likely to go ahead and hit new all-time highs. And that's exactly what we got. And so bringing it back to Tesla, when you see a black candle like this or a red candle like this, it's not the end of the world. What we want to pay attention to is, well, is the close, where we close, higher than the previous trading session? In fact, one thing I like to do is look at it from a line chart perspective, because line charts just show the closing price, and we're still higher than the previous session, and so that's still good news. Now, I do think that from a technical perspective, Tesla can continue pushing up as long as there's still some positive catalysts, right? Now, I don't, and this is a part where some people are like, Justin, you're not bullish enough for Tesla, right? Long term, I have my fingers crossed that Tesla does something with FSD and the robo-taxis actually does come to life, and that Tesla ends up hitting that price target that Kathy Wood and a lot of the Uber Tesla zealots say. But I don't think we're there just yet. I think it's going to be some time. And it's, we get a lot of hope and promises from Elon, but we end up seeing a lot of delays. Now, from a technical perspective, I do believe that we can see momentum for Tesla to continue pushing up, especially because we have this low volume node here in the volume profile. So if there's some buying pressure, we could easily see Tesla stock pop up. But I think that the next area of resistance would be right around over here, 380, kind of around these levels right over here, which was the previous support. And we know that with the principles of polarity, previous support ends up being new resistance. Now, one thing that I was looking at was Bollinger Bands. However, with Bollinger Bands, what a lot of people do when they put this on a chart is I think they kind of misread it, because oftentimes how you want to interpret Bollinger Bands is, once it hits, and by the way, if you don't know what Bollinger Bands are, the middle band is essentially a 20-day moving average, and then the upper band and lower band are standard deviations, 2 standard deviations higher and lower. And so what a lot of technical analysts will do is like, okay, when price action is by the upper band, we're likely to fall down. But something we have to understand is that the actual construct of Bollinger Bands doesn't mean it's always going to be a resistance. What they actually measure is volatility. And so we could have Bollinger Bands actually go up, even though the stock is, at these high levels. And we saw that back in April. For example, we saw the stock, Tesla stock touch the upper band, right? And then it kind of came down, but we saw Tesla stock still continue going up because we could see volatility expand. And so I know a lot of people are saying, okay, well, Tesla stock is probably, it's at these higher levels of these Bollinger Bands, it's going to fall down. But we can see volatility expanding, especially if there's more bullish news. And when I say bullish news, I don't just mean with Tesla individually, with updates with FSD, but just more positive catalyst events from an economic standpoint. Now, we do have the producer price index coming out this week, which is it's another inflationary gauge that a lot of people kind of ignore. Really, a lot of people just pay attention to CPI, but you want to look at the producer price index, and we still have another inflationary gauge before September. And so I think that it's very likely that we get the 25 basis point cut in September, and that could sustain a move of Tesla going up to around that 380 level. Now, going higher than that, I think Tesla will need some more positive news. And I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying it would need to happen to justify the price action of Tesla going up higher. But you guys let me know what you guys think. Also, make sure to hit that like button if you found any value in today's video. And before you guys go, make sure to check out this video right over here, and I'll see you guys on that next video. Take care, guys.